Well, hello, and welcome to Stop It, Let's Team Up. I have no idea what episode numbers this is. I'm sitting here with Ron from Fantastic Comic Fan. Say hi, Ron.
Hey, glad to be back, Ross.
I had asked Ron to pick a Marvel 2-in-1 issue to cover because I love team ups and I love Marvel 2-in-1 is my favorite team up book. And he picked issue 50, which I'm very glad he did because it's an absolute favorite of mine. So before we get started, let's jump to all the pertinent data that I gleam off of Grand Comic Book Database, and we'll be right back. All right, Ron. First, thanks again for coming on. And why did you pick this one? That's going to be my first question.
One of the reasons why I picked this one is because the issues that I actually wanted to talk about were not on the app.
Oh my God, which ones were they?
You know what? I can't remember. I actually think I was going to actually do a Marvel 201 annual, but it wasn't on the app.
Yeah, I know which one it is. It's that Great Avengers one. It's not. Oh no, not that. Then there's an issue I noticed. There's a giant size. It's like 75 is missing, and it's the thing in the Avengers.
And there's another. There's just these big gaps. But the other reason is that I remember this issue, and it ties into another issue later on, which isn't in the app, which is issue 100.
Yeah, which that really surprised me. And we were venting our normal vent about why shit isn't on these apps, you lazy fuckers. Well, it makes no sense.
You argued with me that it takes all this time and energy.
I know it does,
but no, because I keep going back to Archie Comics, who's done Betty and Veronica from the Golden Age to the Bronze Age, almost 400 issues, and they release stuff like 2 or 3 issues every week of Betty and Veronica. If they could do Betty and Veronica, hey, I'm glad to do Betty and Veronica, but why did it take all this time to fill in gaps of these things? Marvel Unlimited just filled in Defenders last year and Daredevil finally. They had these gaps.
Is Defenders complete? Does it have everything?
Yep. Okay. And last year, same thing with Daredevil. They had this 15-issue gap. Now you can read all the Defenders and all the Daredevil.
I would like to go back and see which ones are coming. We're doing an omnibus. We're doing a trade because they just did another Silver Age Daredevil trade omnibus. They just announced it. So I bet those issues are in that damn thing. Bob Brown era.
The other interesting thing about this is that this is written and drawn by John Byrne.
It's his first. I didn't realize until you sent me notes. I had forgotten that this was the first solo issue. And I did him as by himself, writing and drawing by himself.
Yeah, and I like to go down rabbit holes, and I just don't want to be a talking head where we just talk about comic books. So I go digging for data. Yeah, he co-wrote a few issues before, but this is the first issue that he wrote himself, and this is the only one of 2 issues that he wrote of Marvel 2-in-1. The second issue was number 100, which is the follow-up.
Now, which went because the book was being canceled. And he was taking over the thing because he was taking the thing out of the FF and it was getting his own book.
Yes, and this is where it was right at the end of Secret Wars, and he had left the Fantastic Four and was actually doing solo adventures, I think somewhere out in space. But
he was left on the Secret World planet for about 25 issues.
Yes. And the basic premise of this plot is Reed has a serum that would cure Ben of his, orange hide, but the current version of Ben it won't work on him.
So because he's too mutated, yeah.
Yes. So Ben takes the always handy Dr. Doom's time platform, which is just the old chest that they pull out all the time.
What I love is I was reading it the other day when I was rereading. It's like, does Reed not lock stuff up?
Nobody does. Nobody does.
You don't have to worry about your villains breaking in and using the time machine. Ben and Johnny are going to go screw shit up.
So Ben goes on the time platform, goes to the past, gives his supposed past incarnation the cure, and he becomes Ben Grimm instead of Thing. Ben Grimm goes back to the future and finds out that, hey, you just created an alternate timeline. You're stuck the way you are. This is the way it is. And then 100 also goes back to this alternate universe again and has him team up not with the Thing, but now as Ben Grimm.
Yeah.
And this thing, Ben Grimm, that's in 50 and 100, he's only in a couple of times. But this is also a precursor to his love of Fantastic Four, because he went from this to Fantastic Four later on.
Well, I think this, and I was thinking about that, because they weren't letting artists write and draw a book. I mean, it was really unheard of.
What was funny is
but I think this was his audition piece.
Yes.
I think this was because he had worked with Marv on FF already.
No, he had not done FF yet. No,
he had done it. No, he did it with someone else.
Yes.
He did it with Marv.
Yes.
Then he did this. Then because he was gonna be leaving X-Men because him and Claremont didn't get along.
Well, but right now, this is where Byrne actually had a little cachet, because this is about 2 years into the X-Men. So he had a little cachet. He goes, well, give me this. The other interesting thing that I noticed on this cover is it says the big 50th issue. Okay. There's nothing big. It's a normal standard size issue. But I made this point because back then, comic book companies didn't really go out of their way to celebrate big numbers. Unlike today, where they do all this wonky legacy math to try to come up with Flash number 700, all this crazy legacy numbering. Back then, they really didn't care much about the legacy numbering until Fantastic Four 200, which came out maybe 9 months before, where Marv Wolfman had to convince Marvel, let's do this big double-sized issue.
Yeah, because they were always singles. Avengers 100, which was this big, everybody will be back. But it was 26 pages.
But Fantastic Four got that ball rolling all these decades later. Oh, we got to make these big thing of the big numbers. So that's where the big 50th issue came out, because Marvel was just like, hey, you know what? We can get some sales by stoking this fire a little bit. Big 50th issue.
Burns a big hit.
Burns a big hit. And here's the other thing about Marvel 2-in-1. During this time frame, it did not have a consistent writing crew. There was no consistent writing.
Yeah, it really didn't.
I was going through before and after. I'm going, wow. You have to wonder, how the heck did Byrne get the 50th issue? What kind of cachet did you pull to actually, unless it was just a great story idea? I'm like, you know what? You got to give Byrne credit. This is a really great story idea.
No, it is. And it's a reason. It's very much, I know he went back to the meeting. See, he goes, that's the kind of FF stories I want to write, because FF would jump around with creative writers, at this point, until he came on. A run for a writer was 20 some issues, maybe.
Yes.
Marv would do it for a year and a half. Then Jerry Conway would do it, and then Len Wein would do it.
Claremont was the first. Wasn't Claremont like the first Bronze Age writer that actually stayed on a book for a long time?
Oh yeah. Because this is when that started to happen.
Because even like Englehart, when he did Avengers, he didn't do a big run. None of these after Stan Lee.
He did bigger than others, but not
these big, huge, massive runs.
He did. Englehart's Avengers run is 45 issues long.
That's not too bad for back
50.
then.
It's 50 if you count all the giant sizes. It's an even 50.
And people nowadays who are just getting into comic books don't realize how important John Byrne is. We have never talked about John Byrne.
A little bit of that is on him. He did not play well on the internet, so a lot of people got pissy with him, and I think some of it's that, and also it's a generational thing. It's like, you don't like people go, well, I started reading comics in the Bronze Age. And so, you'll hear, this is where I started. That's what I like. It's some silly stuff, but his FF is still, I think, one of the best runs.
Every comic book era has great comic books that should be read in the context of the time. John Byrne is a major figure. Sure. Has he done anything in the last 40 years? No, but you're right. His Fantastic Four run is an iconic run. A lot of people consider it the second best run after Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Oh, I would say that. But and having reread part of it recently, because I got the two Omnis with all of his stuff. Like the first one is half of it, it's his stuff he did with other people, and then the second half of that volume is part of it, and then it's all tied up. It's really good, and he doesn't reinvent the wheel.
And well, he didn't. His basic thing was always going back to the basics, because people don't realize that when Crisis happened, he went over and did he went over from Fantastic Four to Superman. And your mythology of Superman right now, today in 2023, is Byrne's mythology. Byrne and Barb Wolfman, that all stems right back.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, sure, you can talk about during the reign of Superman, death of Superman, that crew of people like Dan Jurgens, that whole
God, yeah. But see, that the Diamond era is a great. But Diamond era is a great.
But they still were resting on what Byrne started.
Yeah. I think Marv was in there because some of the stuff Byrne did was a little wonky, and I think having Marv and then Roger Stern, and Louise Simonson, they would tweak it because they all knew it. You notice they were all friends of his.
Yes, it doesn't matter that Byrne is 40 years out of date. It doesn't matter that he pissed off people. He's done some really iconic runs that deserve to be read.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of your Wanda stuff stems from Byrne.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, X-Men. It's like he hadn't done X-Men in, not counting Hidden Years.
But the whole Scarlet Witch with her kids being not kids.
Well,
that came from Byrne. But that came from Byrne.
I do. You know what? I
believe the White Vision also came from Byrne.
That's when he did that one short. I beat up on him for that on the podcast a lot, because he would get in pissing contests with other creators about what they did to continuity, and then he would make his corrections. And I've never been a fan of his West Coast Avengers, because he made some changes that I didn't like. I like the White Vision. I liked taking Wonder Man's stuff out of his head, because that kind of built some good soap opera. But he didn't like Englehart's take on the Celestial Madonna origin of the Vision, so he erased it. And then Kurt Busiek had to go back in and go, okay, you're both right, shut the fuck up. And that's what Avengers Forever was him going, Busiek, who likes to mess up other people's continuity. He brought Jean Grey back, which was stupid. I will always say that was stupid. She was dead, leave her dead. But Byrne's stuff is so good, and he knew, and his that whole Master Pandem, whatever that bad
Master
guy,
Pandemonium.
Yeah, it's a good arc. It's a really good arc.
What
I don't think I'm a big fan of almost anything he did, and because he did the basics. Did you ever read the Hidden Years? Not the Hidden Years, Marvel the Forgotten.
Yes,
the one where he's told, because continuity had to be stretched because you can't have time moving the real. So he goes, oh, these are the heroes of the 60s and 70s, and he made up a whole new. And I thought it was really good. I mean, I still own those floppies.
But this particular issue serves as a good introduction to John Byrne as a writer and as an artist.
Oh yeah. It's a
also
one and done.
Classic Bronze Age stuff. The Thing made a really good team up partner, because he was the everyman character of the Marvel Universe. He could just team up with anybody. Much more versatile than Spider-Man, in my opinion. I
agree. I think this was the first comic series that I had a complete run of. And that's when I started as a collector. And that's because it was small. I mean, it was 50 hadn't even come out when I completed my run. I was like in the 40s.
The other thing that sets Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1 apart is that Marvel 2-in-1 actually had story arcs where they would actually have multi-part stories for 5, 6, 7 issues.
Oh, great ones. Project Pegasus, the sequel to
We've done the introduction of Spider-Woman back, in Marvel 2-in-1 back in that 32-ish when, we've done that.
Yeah. The Serpent Crown. I became a big Quasar fan from reading Marvel 2-in-1.
Yes.
Because I was a kid when he came, when the original Marvel Boy came back as the Crusader, when Perez was drawn FF. I mean, I'm lucky. Byrne was drawing comics when I was in middle school. That's when he started writing. Him and Perez came in. Like I was in middle school, late, I don't know. Because this came out in January 1979?
Yes.
I was in 8th grade.
I was 12 years old. It's about 8th grade.
I traced this cover. I would get tracing paper and trace covers, and my copy of it had so many indentions from me just trying to, I never could learn to draw, but just messing with it. I read it over and over again. I think Marvel, I really do not understand why there's only been spotty like story arc reprints of Marvel 2-in-1 and Marvel Team Up. I think DC has the same problem. Why don't you reprint the Team Up books? Why don't you do Team Up books? Because you get stories like this, these great one and dones that will spark an idea, because you can see the beginning of Byrne's FF in this issue.
Yes.
I mean, and what I like is when he did FF with Marv, he had Joe Sinnott inking it. And Byrne knows to have a different inker for different books. Austin for X-Men, that's that look. And when he goes solo to FF, it's him inking himself.
Yes.
So it looks a little more like early Kirby. It looks very, you know what I mean? He was an incredibly smart, he is a incredibly smart artist. And this one it screams Marvel. It's fun. You don't need to know all this history.
No.
And it gives you a reason for something that doesn't really ever need a reason. You know what I mean? People in continuity, well, why does he look different? Why does it matter? It's just the artists have changed. It's just that. That's all it is. But they gave you a reason why he went from dinosaur to rock.
Yes.
And it was great. And I miss the original Rocky look. I miss this era with the rock eyebrows. I miss it. But this is just it's a near perfect comic book. And it's what comics should be. You can read it, and it takes more than 10 minutes to read it. And Ben's a great character. He really gets Ben. I think he is one of the best writers of Ben Grimm.
He is, and it's too bad he's not. He's one of the few old Marvel people that have not come back to Marvel. Over the last year, you get a resurgence of Marvel come back. It'd be nice to see him doing some more. I mean, he had Roy Thomas come back doing some stuff. Claremont's doing some stuff. It'd be nice to have seen Byrne just to, push all the animosity aside.
I don't know what, there's a lot of ego with these guys sometimes. And it's, and you don't know what's going on in the background, who's pissed him off. And, the internet was not kind to older creators who, they didn't know how to behave. And I'm going to put some of that on both sides of that. The fans shouldn't pick on him, or don't start an argument with a creator. That's stupid.
Well, because these creators, part of my podcast is, and when I talk about comic books and creators, is I'm a big cheater. If I can't talk something nice about them, then I'm not going to say anything else, because you know what? Even if it's the worst comic book, worst drawn, worst written comic book, so I put a lot of time and energy to draw. Some of these people, they're not like a Kirby. Some of these people may take a day, 2 or 3 days to draw a single page. Yeah, and I'm going to come along like a dick and trash your artwork or your writing style when that writing thing you've been working on that project. No, I'm not going to do that.
And it's and art is subjective. It's like, we can't say this is, we all have different tastes. I'm covering Golden Age comics with my Starman podcast, and when I have to do an all-star comic, some of the art's rough, and I had to learn as a fan that these guys, they had to knock a page out. They had to knock out 3 or 4 pages a day.
Yes.
To make a living. So it's rushed.
And people don't realize back then, it wasn't a rock star status. You did not tell people you wrote and drew in comic books.
You were lucky if your name was on it.
Well, and they didn't say that what they did as a career, because that was considered the bottom of a job career. Nobody worked in comic book industry. It was considered a low man on the totem pole.
If you weren't a script writer,
they were no respect at all, and the wages and the recognition. Because you're right, half these comic books out there, we have no idea who wrote them, who drew them, and they just got lost in time, and that's just too bad.
It is, But hey, we've got, like, as always, whenever I'm talking, we've gone off on tangents.
Again.
But this is, folks, if you've never read it, go on the app, read it. It is a classic Bronze Age. Why Bronze Age comics are fun, I think, because I am primarily a Bronze Age guy. I like modern. I'm still reading, I still read certain titles. I will always read them. But this is kind of my sweet spot. This through 79 to about 89.
Yeah.
It's
that's a good innovative time.
It is. There's a lot of changes. I'm one of the people of my generation I liked Crisis, and I liked what Crisis did. You know, did I miss the multiverse? Yeah, they brought it back. I don't care. But that, Wally's my Flash. I didn't read Superman religiously as a kid. My brother would give me key comics, or I would read some and loved them, and others I didn't. I mean, I would read Superman just to see Kurt Swan draw him. But, I didn't read it regularly until the Diamond era. I was more a Marvel kid before Crisis, because they were being more innovative. So, but this is a great one. It's really good. And I'm glad I read it, because I'm going to give a self plug. Kirby, who guests on me, we're going to do a series once a month called 4 for 4, and we're going to cover 4 issues of FF once a month in publication order. Just kind of give an overview. And I'd never read the first. I hadn't read all the Kirby Lee stuff until I read that first omnibus.
They're great.
And well, someone told I read the first Omni, that's the first 30, and I was like, these are not as good as I thought they'd be. The first few were great, and then at the end they got good, but there was some silly stuff like, oh, we lost all our money, now we're going to go to Hollywood. Oh, by the way, the Submariner owns the movie studio. But it's silly, it's 60s. But I started after that, and I went, 30 on is where we're going to get the Silver Surfer. We're going to get Black Panther. We're going to get the Inhumans. And that's where Jack is kind of going, Stan, just shut up and write the damn dialogue.
Right. Yep.
I want to do more than what we've been doing. And I also think that's when they've been reading the letters, and people like Roy and others are going, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that when you do this? And and Jack says, we need to go. It's not 1940 anymore. We need to move to the next level.
Agreed.
So,
yes.
Yeah. NFF is such a unique book, and I'm looking forward to reading more of it, because I do want to get up to, because I started FF like about 10 issues after Jack left. So, Ron, why don't you plug your stuff now? Because you have a great podcast and you're working really hard on it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic Comic Fan podcast. It's getting ready to celebrate its 2nd anniversary. It's a short form podcast, usually about 15, 20 minutes. And the topics vary. I generally don't talk about new comics that come out. It's usually short and concise, usually pretty meaty. And I'll cover anything from the golden age to the not quite so present. And we'll talk about creators and do a lot of Kickstarters and indie comics. You never know what's going to come out. It's always something new on my podcast. So I never have a real schedule.
Yeah. My schedule's shit right now, because it's just the world, life gets into the way of talking about comics. I find that
is true.
Annoying. I find it very annoying. All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening. Please check out Ron's podcast. It's great. You're going to get something different every time. And I do appreciate a short form. Mine go a little long. I try to keep mine to under 20 minutes. I've been pretty good recently, but sometimes, But as always, folks, be safe, be smart. Please be kind to one another. This world could use more of that. And read some comics. Read some John Byrne comics. Highly recommend them.
Great writer and author. Thanks again, Ross.
Have a good one.